roof of a clothing store has suddenly collapsed. Employees hear muffled cries rise from beneath the rubble. No one knows how many people are trapped inside. Jacksonville, Florida firefighters are just finishing lunch when the call comes in from emergency dispatch.
We have a collapse at Cedar Hill Shopping Center. Maximum full assignment, engine 31, ladder 10, tower squad 22, fire 5, fire 6.
Captain John Wood and his fire rescue team immediately respond. On the way to the collapse, Captain Wood receives an incident update.
They had already discovered that there were 2 people trapped inside the building. We knew when we got there we were going to have a working scene.
When Captain Wood arrives, he can see the entire right side of the roof has collapsed. Rescue workers can hear a victim, but they cannot see her. She is buried beneath tons of rubble and debris. The firefighters will not be able to reach the woman from inside the store. Captain Wood relocates the rescue outside, on top of the collapsed roof. With the sound of her cries to lead them, rescue workers zero in on 42-year-old Gwenith Peterson. Within minutes, the team partially uncovers Gwenith. She is folded beneath a section of the wall.
She actually had been pushed all the way to the floor by this rubble.
The crew slides Gwenith out from under the wreckage. She is able to sit up. The team struggles to pull her free.
Are your legs pinned?
Yeah, she's still pinned. Hold on.
Her legs are wedged beneath a concrete pillar. But Gwenith is desperately trying to communicate her real concern. Gwenith's 4-year-old son, Garrett, is also trapped, buried down near her feet beneath tons of concrete block and steel beams. Gwenith and her son had been shopping in the clothing store when the ceiling suddenly collapsed on top of them.
I'm sitting there with my right hand down by my ankle, trapped under my son's face, and I could feel the blood coming between my fingers. The only thing I could move was my thumb, where I could stroke him to comfort him. And I kept thinking, this isn't happening.
But the team cannot reach little Garrett until they free his mother.
I had to sit there and watch them try to get my leg out from under this pile. All I can do is see my child squirming and moving around, and nothing I could do to help him. Nothing.
Okay, am I gonna need a second airbag on here?
I can't feel my leg.
You're moving. You're moving.
An airbag is brought in to attempt to lift the massive beam pinning Gwenith's legs.
Real slow.
Once inflated, Wood hopes the bag will lift the beam high enough to pull Gwenith free.
Okay, no, she's free. Okay, take her out. Right there, stop. Wait,
Watch your head.
right here.
Back forward.
Right across on me, like her back. Okay, she's gonna be okay. We're gonna get him out. Okay.
I want you to let go. I want you to let go and lay back.
Watch his right leg.
Rescue workers gently pull Gwenith out from under the beam. With Gwenith free, Captain Wood and the team focus on little Garrett.
It took us a few minutes to actually see him. The child was lying on the floor. He was lying on his stomach. His head was away from us. We were very concerned.
Captain Wood and the rescue workers can see that Garrett has stopped moving. They know time is running out.
Prepare me a second airbag.
Jacksonville resident Gwenith Peterson is being rushed to the hospital. She was just pulled from the rubble of a clothing store that collapsed while she and her son were shopping. But 4-year-old Garrett is still buried beneath piles of steel and concrete block. Jacksonville Fire Captain John Wood and the team can see the little boy is breathing, but he is not making a sound.
We were speaking to the child, but there was no response to him at all. He was not even making any noise, no moaning, nothing.
Captain Wood is handed an air chisel to cut through the large sheets of metal pinning the child.
Hold on, he's
Now they can see that the situation is more severe than any of them could have imagined.
There was a steel bar across this child's neck, and that bar could not have been more than 1.5 inches off the floor.
But before they could sever the bar, the team must remove the rubble entombing little Garrett.
Fill this up. Let's take this. Come right here. Reel that back out of our
Captain Wood knows that removing the wrong piece of wreckage could cause tons of cement and steel to fall onto the tiny child. They must proceed cautiously.
Slow down, Penny.
It's almost as if you felt helpless. It was not like we could just reach in there and move everything out of the way. It just wasn't as simple as that.
He's face down.
Anytime you're working with children, it's the hardest, it's the worst. And this was a very emotional rescue.
Then, a tiny hand is visible. But they can't pull the child free. Garrett's neck is still pinned beneath the steel bar. A hydraulic cutter is brought in to sever the bar.
Once we had the most of the rubble away from his head and neck area, the concern became, how are we going to lift this weight?
More airbags are put into position near the child.
And it was an eternity for all of us right there close. Of course, our biggest fear was that the child was going to be dead.
The inflated bags begin to lift the heavy rubble. They pull Garrett out alive. He has been buried face down for more than 25 minutes beneath thousands of pounds of sheetrock and metal girders. Firefighters take him inside and begin medical treatment.
It's hard to understand and to believe, even for those of us that were on the scene, how this child was trapped as heavily as he was, and then to respond so quickly and to look as good as he looked. It's a miracle. That's all I can tell you. I don't have another explanation for that.
Little Garrett is immediately transported to a local hospital for treatment. An investigation into the collapse is launched by the Jacksonville Area Occupational Safety and Health Administration, or OSHA. The small clothing store was part of a larger strip mall where common walls separate the shops. On the day of the collapse, workers were tearing down the unit directly next door to the clothing store, while people were inside shopping. The OSHA investigation revealed the columns in the common walls between the two stores had been constructed improperly. Then, when the two-story department store was demolished, the common wall became unbalanced. When heavy rain saturated the insulation in the clothing store's roof, the extra weight was too much. The overload pulled the columns over onto the clothing store's roof, which collapsed on Gwenith and little Garrett. Today, Gwenith and Garrett have fully recovered, but the devastating accident has not left them unscarred.
It was horrible. It was absolutely one of the worst things I've ever experienced in my whole life, and I would hope no one would ever have to experience that again.
They understand that without the bravery and skill of the emergency workers on site that day, they would never have survived.
There really, really are angels on earth. They put their life on the line without even thinking. Those firemen getting to him when they did, and God keeping him alive. He's a miracle. He's an absolute miracle.
Captain Wood agrees.
Even now it seems impossible to me, but the fact that the child lived, it's almost out of our hands. If you believe in miracles, that's what this was.